So I'm going to do a demonstration on some shading techniques and tools. And I'm going to start things off with a reminder that when you are shading a drawing, it's really important that you try to shade gently. And one of the best ways to shade gently is to hold the pencil from a sideways grip so that more of the tip of the pencil is in contact with the paper. And you're going to shade it sideways so that you can fill in more area quicker. But while I am shading, I'm pressing gently and just kind of building up the layer of graphite depending on how dark I want it to be. If you shade in more of the traditional pencil grip like this, you get a finer point, and sometimes it makes more of a scribble mark that's hard to get rid of. If you press very hard while you're shading and you make a lot of scribbles like this, no matter how much you try to blend it, those scribble lines tend to still show through your shading. So there we have two areas that I'm trying to blend the marks away, and they're very persistent. It's very visible. But over here, where I shaded sideways and tried to hold the pencil softly as I built up the gray, you can get a really smooth, even gray. Another tip when you are shading is to take a piece of paper and put it beneath your palm, so that if you are working on your drawing and you're shading an area, what's underneath your palm is not going to smudge any other areas of gray on your paper. Next, let's move to some techniques for blending some shading. Now, a classic one that most people are aware of is that graphite can be blended with your fingertips. And this is great for just sample sketches or when you don't have a lot of materials. But the downside of this is that our hands have natural oils in them. And when you're using your fingers as a blending tool, you might unintentionally be introducing some oils into your artwork, and that is not going to be archival quality. If you want your artwork to last a long time and not yellow with age, you want to use techniques that are going to be archival. So that brings us to the blending stump or a tortillon. So this is called a blending stump. This one is double-ended, also known as a tortillon, though typically the one-ended, one-sided tools are the tortillons. And it's like a bunch of paper wrapped very tightly, and you can rub it over the surface of your graphite to blend it. And when you are blending with a tortillon, you want to use the edge for blending large areas. So I'm kind of using the flat edge of my tortillon to blend here, my blending stump. Not the tip, because if you're blending with the very point, it's going to take a long time, and as you smash and push pressure on here, you're going to lose that point, which is nice for small areas when you just want to blend a very tight space. As a reminder, when working with the tortillons and the blending stumps, please do not attempt to peel the layers or unravel them, because once a blending stump like this starts to unravel, it's pretty much useless. So this one has been ruined by a student picking at the paper. If you have a blending stump and it's starting to get really dirty on the end and you actually don't want that much graphite on the blending stump, the best way to deal with that is to take some sandpaper and actually rub the tip of the blending stump across the sandpaper to sand away some of the imperfections. And in fact, a lot of drawing kits will actually come with a small little square of sandpaper for this. So you can kind of see right here how I have started to sand away some of the impurities on the end of this blending stump. Another way to blend is to blend with a tissue. And you just take a Kleenex and use it to push some of the graphite around. And that makes a really nice, soft, hazy blend, which is nice for really big areas where you don't want any lines or marks to show. Because sometimes when you are working with a blending stump, actually they can sometimes leave kind of streaks and lines, especially if you're using the point of the blending stump. And if you don't want that hint of line direction, a tissue is a nice option for that. But tissues aren't very strong and they won't last very long if you are using tissues. And if you're like me in my classroom, we need those tissues for when everybody starts to get a cold and they have a snotty nose. So an even better option is a makeup sponge. And these are just little white foam sponges that you can buy in the cosmetics section. And you can take that makeup sponge and also apply it to the graphite to blend it around and get rid of that texture. So all of these are great for tonal shading when you want something more realistic and less texture. So we've got using your fingers, a blending stump or a tortillon, a tissue, or a makeup sponge. When shading, some other advice, if you're trying to get a very, very light region, the lightest shading in your image, sometimes you can take your blending stump that just has a little bit of that contamination on the end and apply it directly to the paper. Again, I'm using the side of the blending stump, and you can just get some of that graphite off of the blending stump onto the paper for the very, very palest values in your artwork. When it comes to the dark regions, especially when you're trying to fill a very large area, I have these Cretacolor graphite crayons. It's a giant chunk of graphite, and on the end you'll see here it says 8B. So this is a very, very soft chunk of graphite that's going to give me a very dark region. So I can use this to fill in an area a little faster than the tip of my pencil. And some students have tried putting it on its side, but if you put the graphite chunk on its side, you tend to get a lot of textures from the table, and it doesn't apply as evenly as if you try to use the end of this. And when you blend that, you can get a very nice dark value, and especially if you press really hard and you build up more of that graphite, you can get some exceptionally dark areas, like maybe in your image you have a black background or a pure black shadow. This graphite chunk is great for filling in large areas of dark value.